They say the truth will set you free, but they never tell you what it costs. My name is Walter Callahan. I'm 72 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had a perfect daughter. My Genevieve, she was the light of my world. One Tuesday afternoon, that light went out. She sent me a voice message, a simple mistake, a message meant for her husband, Daniel. I still remember the chime of my phone, the casual way I pressed play, and the cold silence that followed as my entire world collapsed. What I heard wasn't just a secret, it was a declaration of war, and it made me do things I never thought myself capable of. This is the story of how a father's love was turned into a weapon, and how the deepest betrayals reap the most vicious karma. The late afternoon sun of early autumn always held a certain melancholy for me. It slanted through the bay window of my study, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Tiny, forgotten universes. At 72, you start noticing the small things. The way the leather on my favorite armchair has softened to the exact contour of my shoulders. The faint scent of pipe tobacco and old paper that clings to the room, a ghost of my younger self. My life, by all accounts, was a placid sea. My wife, Helen, had passed 5 years prior, and while that wound would never truly heal, it had scarred over into a tender memory I could touch without wincing. My solace, my pride, was my daughter, Genevieve. Genevieve, my Jenna. To me, she was still the little girl with scraped knees and a fierce determination to climb the tallest oak tree in our yard. Now at 35, she was a polished diamond, beautiful, intelligent, with a laugh that could charm a statue. She had married a man I genuinely admired, Daniel Peterson. Daniel was solid, the kind of man you'd want in a trench with you. He'd built his architectural firm, Peterson Designs, from the ground up. He wasn't born to wealth like some of the vipers in his industry. He earned it with sleepless nights, calloused hands, and a mind that saw beauty in steel and glass. They lived in a house that Daniel himself had designed, a marvel of modern architecture in the affluent suburb of Crestwood. It was all clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the horizon. I visited every Sunday for dinner. We'd sit on their sprawling patio, sipping a fine scotch Daniel had saved for the occasion, watching my 2 grandchildren, 8-year-old Leo and 6-year-old Sophia, chase fireflies on the manicured lawn. It was a portrait of success, of happiness. It was everything I had ever wanted for her. I'd always felt a small nagging unease, a flicker in the periphery I couldn't quite name. Jenna had always had a taste for the finer things, something she inherited from her mother, but in recent years it had sharpened into a ravenous hunger. The designer bags became more frequent, the cars were upgraded on a yearly basis, the talk of lavish European vacations more insistent. Daniel, bless his heart, indulged her. He loved her with a blinding, absolute devotion. He saw her desire for luxury not as a flaw, but as a challenge to work harder, to provide more, to build their gilded cage ever stronger. "She deserves the world, Walter," he'd told me once, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "And I'm going to give it to her." I'd nodded, but a cold thought had slithered through my mind. What happens when one person's world is never big enough? I dismissed it as the cynicism of an old man. I was a retired forensic accountant. For 40 years, I'd made my living by finding the rot beneath the polished veneer of corporate balance sheets. I was trained to see patterns, to find the lie in the numbers. Maybe, I told myself, I was starting to see phantom deceptions in my own life. I wanted to believe in the portrait. I needed to. Genevieve was the last piece of Helen I had left in the world. That Tuesday began like any other. I'd spent the morning tending to my roses, my back complaining with every snip of the shears. After a modest lunch, I settled into my study to read. The house was quiet, filled only with the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had measured out the peaceful cadence of my retirement. Around 3:15 p.m., my phone chimed. A notification on the screen. New voice message, Jenna. I smiled. She often sent me little voice notes during the day. A quick, "I love you, Dad," or a funny story about the kids. It was our little ritual. I tapped the play button, leaning back in my chair. expecting to hear the sweet melody of my daughter's voice. The message began not with a greeting, but with a sigh. It was a sigh of exasperated, venomous frustration. It was a tone I had never heard from her before, and the words that followed were not for me. They were a stray bullet from a war I didn't even know was being fought, and they flew straight into the heart of my carefully constructed peace. Ugh, finally, her voice began, laced with an unfamiliar metallic edge. It wasn't the warm, effervescent tone she used with me. This was raw, unfiltered, and cold. He's gone. I swear, Vincent, he hovers like a nervous hen. I thought he'd never leave for that site meeting. Vincent? The name meant nothing to me? A colleague? A friend I hadn't met? Her voice continued, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made the hair on my arm stand on end. Listen, the final transfer has to be tomorrow. The Phoenix account is active. I moved the last $100K from the household reserve this morning. He'll just think it was for the landscaping deposit. The man is so trusting it's almost pathetic. A chuckle followed. It was a cruel, mocking sound, devoid of any humor. It was the sound of a predator toying with its prey. My hand holding the phone began to tremble. My breath hitched in my chest. Phoenix account? Landscaping deposit? Pathetic? This wasn't my Jenna. This was a stranger speaking with my daughter's voice. Once the capital is consolidated, she went on, her words quick and precise, you trigger the call on those margin loans you set up for the firm. With the main operating account drained and that unexpected debt called in, Peterson Designs will be insolvent by Friday. He'll be blindsided, the lawyers will have a field day, and by the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in Monaco. He signed the power of attorney last month for the estate planning, so I have full authority. He didn't even read the fine print. The study seemed to shrink around me. The ticking of the grandfather clock grew louder, each tick a hammer blow against my skull. Peterson Designs. Daniel's life's work. His baby. She was talking about destroying it, not just leaving him, but utterly obliterating him, financially, professionally, emotionally. I have the kids' passports, she added, her voice chillingly casual, as if discussing a grocery list. I'll tell him I'm taking them to your sister's for the weekend. He won't suspect a thing until the bank calls on Monday morning. By then, our tracks will be gone, and so will we. A pause. I could hear the faint clink of ice in a glass. God, I can't wait to be free of this suffocatingly decent life, free of Mr. Predictable. You were right, Vin. I was meant for more than this beige suburban prison. I just had to be patient. Okay, I have to go. He'll be calling soon to say goodnight to the kids. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't be late. The message ended. Silence. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the oak floor. The sound was deafening. I stared at the device. A black mirror reflecting a distorted version of my horrified face. It was an alien artifact, a bomb that had just detonated in the quiet sanctuary of my life. My first thought was denial, a powerful, instinctual wave of it. This was a mistake, a prank, a crossed wire. It wasn't her. It couldn't be. My Jenna, who cried for a week when her pet hamster died. My Jenna, who volunteered at the children's hospital every Christmas. My Jenna, who looked at her husband with what I had sworn was pure, unadulterated love, but I had spent a lifetime listening for the truth in lies. I knew her voice better than my own. I knew its cadence, its timbre, its subtle inflections. And beneath the venom, it was undeniably her. The pieces began to click into place with sickening speed, the escalating spending, the sudden, inexplicable trips she took for charity board meetings. The slick, handsome man I'd seen her with once at a cafe downtown, whom she dismissed as just a financial advisor, Dad. You know, for my trust. Vincent. His face flashed in my mind. Smug, expensive suit, a predator's smile. I felt a surge of nausea so profound I had to grip the arms of my chair to keep from falling. The portrait of the perfect family shattered into a million razor-sharp shards. It hadn't been a portrait. It had been a meticulously crafted lie. The gilded cage wasn't for her. It was for Daniel. and she hadn't been a captive bird. She had been the one forging the lock, all while sharpening a knife in the shadows. And my grandchildren, Leo and Sophia. She was planning on ripping them away from their father, from their home, from their entire lives, to drag them across the world with a man they didn't know. They weren't her children in that moment. They were assets, pawns in her cruel, elaborate game. A cold rage began to bloom in my chest, replacing the shock and the grief. It was an emotion I hadn't felt in decades. It was the icy, clear-headed fury of a man who has nothing left to lose. I had lost my wife, and now in the space of 90 seconds, I had lost my daughter. Not to death, but to something far worse, a monstrous revelation of her true character. The person I loved didn't exist. She was a phantom, a carefully constructed role played by this cold, calculating stranger. I bent down, my joints groaning in protest, and picked up the phone. I saved the voice message. I saved it to my computer, to a thumb drive, and to a secure cloud server. It was the only evidence I had. It was the crack in the porcelain. And I knew with the chilling certainty of a man who once hunted financial criminals for a living, that I was going to follow that crack until the entire fraudulent facade came crashing down. She had made a mistake. She had sent the message to the one person in the world equipped to dismantle her entire operation. She had forgotten what her father used to do for a living. I would not call Daniel, not yet. He was the victim, blinded by love. Confronting him with this now would make him emotional, unpredictable. He might even confront her, and she would deny everything, erase her tracks, and disappear. No, this required precision. It required a plan. My daughter and her lover, Vincent, had declared war on my family. They just didn't realize they had inadvertently sent the declaration to the opposing general. The quiet sea of my retirement was over. A storm was coming. The man I was for the past decade, Walter Callahan, the gentle retiree, the doting grandfather, died in that study. In his place, a ghost resurrected. W.P. Callahan, forensic investigator. The man who could find a single falsified digit in a mountain of ledgers. The man corporations paid a small fortune to uncover rot and betrayal. I hadn't used those skills in years, but it was like riding a bicycle in hell. You never forget. My first move was to compartmentalize my grief. The heartbreak was a luxury I couldn't afford. It was a howling beast I had to lock in a cage in the back of my mind. There would be time for it later. Now was the time for logic, for strategy. My mind, rusty but still functional, began to assemble a checklist. 1. Identify the accomplice. Vincent, a first name wasn't enough. 2. Map the assets. I needed to know what they were stealing, where it was, and where it was going. The Phoenix account, an offshore shell undoubtedly. 3. Understand the mechanism. Margin loans, a clever, vicious tool, using the company's own credit to create a debt that could be called in to trigger bankruptcy. 4. Gather irrefutable proof. The voice message was my starting point, my Rosetta Stone. But in a court of law, or even the court of Daniel's opinion, I would need more. I needed a paper trail. I needed pictures. I needed to build a case so airtight that even my duplicitous daughter couldn't squirm her way out of it. I started with Vincent. Jenna had mentioned meeting a financial advisor. I scanned my memory of our conversations over the past year. About 6 months ago, she'd name-dropped a firm, Dubois Capital Management, mentioning they were handling some investments for a friend. It had been a casual throwaway comment. Now it was a beacon. A quick search confirmed it. Dubois Capital Management, a boutique firm with a slick website and a glossy office address downtown. The founder and principal? Vincent Dubois. The picture on the website was the same man I'd seen her with at the cafe. Impeccably dressed, a predatory glint in his eyes that I now recognized for what it was. Greed. Next, the finances. This was my home turf. Over the years, Daniel, trusting me implicitly, had occasionally asked me to look over the firm's quarterly reports. I still had login credentials for a read-only portal to the company's primary accounting software. He saw me as a mentor, a second set of eyes. He never would have imagined I'd be using that access to investigate his own wife. The irony was a bitter pill. I spent the next 6 hours locked in my study, The sun went down and I didn't notice. The grandfather clock chimed the evening hours away, and I didn't hear it. Fueled by black coffee and a cold fire, I delved into the digital guts of Peterson Designs. At first, everything looked normal. Revenue was strong, projects were on schedule. Daniel was a brilliant architect, but he was also a meticulous businessman. But I wasn't looking at the surface. I was looking for the subtle tells, the digital fingerprints of fraud. I found the first anomaly around 10 p.m., a series of large payments categorized under consulting fees made out to a holding company I'd never heard of. Vespertine Holdings, LLC. The payments were substantial, totaling over $200,000 in the last quarter alone. They were just small enough and spaced out just enough to not trigger an automatic audit flag. I cross-referenced the LLC's registration. It was a shell company registered in Delaware, with no public list of officers. A dead end. But Jenna had given me another clue. He signed the power of attorney last month for the estate planning. Daniel and Genevieve had joint personal accounts, which I couldn't access. But if she was moving money from the business, she needed a way to authorize it. I dug into the corporate governance documents, the minutes of board meetings. Daniel was the sole board member, a formality, and the authorization logs. There it was, a new signatory added to the main operating account 3 weeks ago. Genevieve Peterson, under the authority of a spousal power of attorney document. The reason cited? To streamline payments and financial management during Mr. Peterson's frequent site visits. It was plausible, it was neat, and it was the door she had opened to let the wolves in. Now for the margin loans. This was Vincent's territory. A company like Peterson Designs, with its strong portfolio and assets, could secure significant lines of credit. If Vincent had advised Daniel to take out loans against his corporate investment portfolio, ostensibly for leveraged growth opportunities, while secretly planning to drain the cash reserves needed to service the debt, he could create a perfect storm. A manufactured liquidity crisis. I couldn't access Daniel's brokerage accounts, but I could see the firm's balance sheet. And there it was, under liabilities. A new entry, dated 2 months ago. A credit line of $2 million from a private lender. Not a major bank, but a smaller, more obscure institution. An institution that would likely be far more aggressive in calling a loan than a mainstream bank. I'd bet my pension that Vespertine Holdings was connected to this lender, and Vincent Dubois was pulling the strings on both. He wasn't just her lover. He was the architect of the entire scheme. She was the inside woman exploiting her husband's trust, while Vincent built the financial weapon aimed at his head. My final step for the night was the most distasteful, but the most necessary. I needed eyes on them. I needed to prove the affair and the conspiracy beyond her voice on a recording. I needed to know their movements. The next morning I made a call. I still had contacts from my old life. One of them was a man named Frank Miller. Frank was a private investigator, a former detective who had gone into business for himself. He was discreet, expensive, and ruthlessly effective. We'd worked on a few corporate espionage cases together back in the day. I met him in a quiet diner on the other side of town. He slid into the booth opposite me, his face impassive. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Walter," he said, nodding curtly. "Been a long time. I thought you were spending your days playing with grandkids and pruning roses." "Things change, Frank," I said, my voice low. I pushed a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000, a picture of Genevieve, and a picture of Vincent Dubois I'd printed from his website. "I need to know everything," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. "Who they meet, where they go. I want photos. I want to know about a shell company called Vespertine Holdings and an offshore account, possibly called Phoenix. I need it yesterday." Frank opened the envelope, glanced at the contents, and then looked at me. He saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man pushed past his limit. He didn't ask personal questions. That's why I trusted him. "You'll have my full attention, Walter," he said, sliding the envelope into his coat. "Where do I start?" I gave him Genevieve's address and Vincent's office address. "She thinks she's taking the kids to her aunt's house for the weekend, starting Friday. The message I intercepted said her plan goes into motion tomorrow. That means today and tomorrow are critical. As I walked out of the diner and into the harsh morning light, I felt a grim sense of purpose. I was no longer just a father. I was a hunter, and I was hunting the two people who had destroyed my family, my daughter and her parasitic lover. The ghost in the numbers had shown me the crime. Now Frank Miller would show me the criminals. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. Every chime of my phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I barely ate. I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, the lights off, monitoring the digital breadcrumbs of my daughter's betrayal and waiting for Frank's reports. The first update came late Wednesday afternoon. A single encrypted text message. Subject GP met Subject VD at a private suite at the Chamberlain Hotel. Arrived 1:05 p.m., still inside. Awaiting visuals. The Chamberlain, a notoriously opulent and discreet hotel downtown, favored by politicians and celebrities for their clandestine meetings. The confirmation of the affair was a formality, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. This wasn't some desperate emotional fling. This was calculated. They were meeting in expensive hotel suites, toasting their impending victory with champagne, while the man she'd sworn to love was on a dusty construction site, working to pay for it all. Later that evening, an email from Frank arrived. Subject: preliminary visuals. Attached were a series of high-resolution photographs. The first few showed Genevieve and Vincent arriving separately at the hotel, then embracing in a secluded corridor. But it was the last photo that made my blood run cold. They were seated at a table in the suite, a laptop open between them, and spread out on the table were documents. Frank's telephoto lens was powerful. I could zoom in, and though blurry, the letterhead was unmistakable. It was from a bank in the Cayman Islands. At the top of the page, I could just make out two words: Phoenix Trust. She wasn't just moving the money, she was finalizing the escape plan. Frank's report followed. Subjects met for approximately 3 hours. Conversation was too low to be picked up by audio surveillance, but their body language was celebratory. Subject VD was observed making a wire transfer on his laptop. After the meeting, GP went to a high-end luggage store and purchased 3 large suitcases. 3 suitcases, one for her, one for Vincent, one for the stolen money. There was no luggage for my grandchildren's toys or favorite books. They were just cargo. The final piece of the financial puzzle clicked into place the next day, Thursday. This was the day she said the final transfer had to happen. I watched the Peterson Designs operating account like a hawk. At 11:42 a.m. it happened. A wire transfer for $1.2 million, the bulk of the company's liquid capital, was initiated. The recipient? Vespertine Holdings, LLC. From there, I knew it would be instantly bounced to the Phoenix account in the Caymans, far beyond easy reach. She had done it. She had pulled the trigger. The corporate guillotine was now in place, waiting for Vincent's signal to drop. But Frank wasn't just good. He was a master of his craft. He had contacts, sources I no longer had access to. On Thursday evening, he sent me his final report before the weekend. It was the nail in the coffin. Walter, the email began, "It's worse than we thought. Vespertine isn't just a shell, it's a creditor." I pulled some strings. The $2 million margin loan taken out by Peterson Designs was provided by a subsidiary of Vespertine. Vincent Dubois is the sole director of both entities. He loaned the company money, and your daughter just paid him back with the company's own cash, plus an extra $1.2 million for their trouble. But the debt instrument is still on the books. He's created a phantom loan. He can still call in the full $2 million debt, forcing the company into bankruptcy, even though he's already been paid back in secret. My head swam. It was a brutally elegant scheme. They weren't just stealing the cash. They were creating a legal trap that would not only bankrupt Daniel, but likely entangle him in accusations of fraud. When the company collapsed, the books would show a massive unpaid loan and missing capital. The signatory on the transfer that drained the accounts? Genevieve Peterson, acting on Daniel's power of attorney. But the ultimate responsibility would fall on him. They were going to frame him. They were going to destroy his reputation, his legacy, and possibly leave him facing criminal charges, all while they sunned themselves on a yacht in the Mediterranean. This discovery changed everything. My initial plan had been to gather evidence and simply stop her. Now stopping her wasn't enough. This wasn't just theft. It was an act of profound, calculated evil. They didn't just want to leave him. They wanted to salt the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. Justice, I realized, couldn't be a quiet affair handled by lawyers in sterile boardrooms. It needed to be as public and humiliating as their betrayal was private and deep. They had built a stage for Daniel's destruction. I decided in that moment that I would use that same stage for their downfall. The time had come. I had the what, the who, the how, and the where. I had a digital and photographic trail of their conspiracy from start to finish. It was time to bring in the victim. It was time to tell Daniel. I picked up the phone, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I dreaded this conversation more than any I'd ever had. I was about to detonate a bomb in the life of a man I respected as a son, and the shrapnel would be the truth about the woman we both loved. I called his personal cell. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and tired. "Walter, hey, good to hear from you. Everything okay?" "Daniel," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and strange in my ears. "We need to talk. Not on the phone. Can you come to my house? Now. It's a matter of life and death." The warmth in his voice vanished, replaced by alarm. "Of course. Is it your health? What's going on?" "Just come, Daniel," I said softly. "And please, for the love of God, do not speak to Genevieve before you get here." An hour later, Daniel's car crunched up my gravel driveway. I watched from the study window as he got out. Even from a distance, I could see the anxiety etched on his face. He was a man who solved problems for a living, and he was walking into one he couldn't possibly imagine. He entered the house, his eyes wide with concern. "Walter, you look terrible. What is it? What's happened?" I led him into the study and closed the door. The air was thick with unspoken dread. I gestured for him to sit in the armchair opposite my desk. On the desk, I had placed a single object, a printed transcript of the voice message. "Daniel," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "what I am about to tell you will be the hardest thing you have ever had to hear. Before I say anything, I need you to promise me you will listen to the entire story without interruption, and you must promise me you will remain calm and logical." He stared at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Walter, you're scaring me. Is this about Jenna? Is she okay? Are the kids?" "They are physically safe," I said, choosing my words with surgical care. "This is about something else entirely." I took a deep breath and began. I told him about the voice message, watching as the color drained from his face. I saw the first flicker of disbelief in his eyes, the instinct to defend his wife. Before he could speak, I slid the transcript across the desk. "Read it, Daniel." His hands shook as he picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the words, then scanned them again, slower this time, as if trying to force them to mean something else. I saw his jaw clench, a muscle twitching violently. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. This is a joke, right? A sick prank?" "I wish it were," I said softly. I turned my computer monitor towards him. "This is what I've been doing for the last 2 days." For the next hour, I walked him through everything. The financial records of Peterson Designs, the fraudulent consulting fees, the wire transfer to Vespertine Holdings, the power of attorney, the margin loan designed to bankrupt him. I showed him the photographs from Frank Miller, Genevieve and Vincent embracing, the Cayman Islands bank documents, the purchase of the luggage. With each new piece of evidence, another layer of his denial was stripped away. I watched him go through the stages of cataclysmic grief right there in my chair. Disbelief gave way to a flash of anger, which was then consumed by a wave of profound, soul-crushing sorrow. His gaze became unfocused, lost in the wreckage of his life. The perfect home he had designed, the beautiful family he adored, the future he was building, it was all a lie, a meticulously crafted illusion designed by the woman sleeping in his bed. When I finished, he didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there staring at the picture of his wife and her lover, his face a mask of agony. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. "The kids," he finally whispered, his voice cracking. "She was going to take my kids." That was the line. Not the money, not the company, not even the affair. The realization that she was going to steal his children from him was what finally broke him. A single tear traced a path down his cheek, then another. He didn't sob. He just sat there as silent tears streamed from his eyes. The quiet devastation of a man whose world had been bombed back to the Stone Age. I let him grieve. I gave him the space for his heart to break. Then after several minutes, I spoke again, my voice firm. You can fall apart later, son. Right now, we have to act. She plans to leave tomorrow, taking Leo and Sophia with her. The trap for your company is set. We are out of time. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw the sorrow in his eyes being replaced by something else. A flicker of the same cold fury that had been fueling me. The man who built skyscrapers from nothing was still in there, buried under the rubble. What do we do? He asked, his voice raw. We don't get angry, I said, leaning forward. We get even. We don't just stop them. We make sure they pay for every single thing they have done. We are going to use their own plan, their own greed, against them. We are going to let them walk right into a trap of our own making. I explained my idea. It was audacious, high risk, and would require nerves of steel. But it was the only way to ensure total justice. They think the money is safe in the Phoenix account, I laid out. They think your company is primed for destruction. They are arrogant. They are complacent. That is their weakness. Your 10th wedding anniversary party is in 2 weeks. It's the perfect stage. Daniel looked at me confused. The party, we should cancel that. No, I countered. We are going to make it the most spectacular party you have ever thrown. We are going to invite everyone, your clients, your colleagues, your friends, our family. Genevieve will love it. It will be the perfect, triumphant send-off for her, a final celebration before she leaves her pathetic husband in ruins. She won't be able to resist the drama of it. A slow, cold understanding dawned on Daniel's face. She is planning to leave tomorrow, I continued. We can't let that happen. You need to go home tonight and be the loving, unsuspecting husband. You need to invent a reason for her to stay for 2 more weeks. A big one. We brainstormed. It had to be something she couldn't refuse. Something that played to her greed. Tell her, I said, the plan crystallizing in my mind, that a massive international development deal you've been working on is about to close. A resort in Dubai. Tell her the final signing is happening the day after your anniversary party, and your presence is required. Tell her the payout will be monumental, enough to set you all up for life. Tell her you want to announce it at the party as a surprise for her. Daniel's eyes widened. She'll believe that. She knows about the Dubai pitch. Exactly, I affirmed. She'll see it as one last score. Why leave tomorrow with a few million when she can wait 2 weeks and potentially get a piece of a much larger pie? Her greed will keep her here. It will make her postpone her plan with Vincent. It will keep her playing the part of the loving wife right up until the very end. For the first time since he had arrived, I saw a spark of fire in Daniel's eyes. The architect, the builder, was starting to see the design. And while she's waiting, I went on, we go to work. We contact my lawyers. We contact the SEC. We get a court order to freeze the Phoenix account, but we keep it secret. We'll work with the bank in the Caymans. They don't like being used for fraud. It's bad for business. We get everything lined up. And then, at the party, in front of everyone whose respect she craves, we pull the rug out from under her. Daniel stood up. He walked to the window and stared out at the darkening garden. He was no longer a victim. He was a man with a mission. He turned back to me, his face set like concrete. All right, Walter, he said, his voice hard as steel. Let's set a trap. The alliance was forged, an old man's cunning and a young man's broken heart, united by betrayal and bonded by the promise of righteous vengeance. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in deception. Daniel played his part with an Oscar-worthy performance. He went home that night and, with a heart full of poison, feigned an ecstatic joy. He told Genevieve about the fictitious Dubai deal, the life-changing commission, and his desire to announce it at their anniversary party. Just as I predicted, her greed overwhelmed her caution. I could picture the frantic, whispered conversation she must have had with Vincent. The score just got bigger. We have to wait. Daniel told me she was practically giddy. She spent the next 2 weeks planning the party with a feverish intensity, seeing it now as her grand farewell tour, a final victory lap before she ascended to her new life. She had no idea she was planning her own execution. While she was busy with florists and caterers, Daniel and I were busy with lawyers and federal agents. My old connections opened doors that would have remained shut to anyone else. We met with the district attorney's office, presenting our evidence in a sealed meeting. The voice message, the financial trail, Frank Miller's entire surveillance portfolio. It was an open and shut case of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The most crucial piece was freezing the Phoenix account. With the help of the U.S. Attorney's Office, we worked through the channels of international financial law. A federal judge issued a sealed court order, which was transmitted to the authorities in the Cayman Islands. Within days, the account was frozen. Genevieve and Vincent's stolen nest egg was trapped, but they had no way of knowing. To them, the money was sitting safely offshore, waiting. Daniel had to maintain the facade at home. It was torture for him. He had to sit at the dinner table with the woman who was planning his ruin, listen to her talk about their future, and smile. He had to kiss her goodnight, knowing she dreamed of another man and a life built on the ashes of his own. He channeled his rage and heartbreak into a cold, disciplined performance. He told me later that he survived by focusing on the image of the party, the moment when the mask would finally come off. We also had to prepare for the party itself. I advised Daniel to hire a professional event security team. He told Genevieve it was because he was expecting high-profile clients from the Dubai deal and wanted everything to be perfect. In reality, their leader was a retired police captain I knew. Two of his plainclothes officers would be mingling with the guests, ready to act when the signal was given. The day of the party arrived. It was a perfect, crisp autumn evening. The house Daniel had built, the monument to his love and success, was aglow with lights. Music drifted through the open glass walls. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns milled around the pool, sipping champagne. It was a scene of staggering opulence. Genevieve was radiant. She wore a stunning silver dress that shimmered under the lights. She moved through the crowd like a queen, accepting congratulations on her anniversary, her smile never faltering. She was the perfect hostess, the adoring wife. Looking at her, I felt a profound emptiness. There was not a trace of the little girl I had raised. She was a beautiful hollow vessel. Vincent Dubois was there, of course. Genevieve had introduced him to Daniel weeks ago as her brilliant financial advisor, and Daniel, playing his part, had invited him. He was smug, oozing a self-satisfied charm. He shook Daniel's hand, patting him on the back, the viper comforting the man he was about to strike. He and Genevieve exchanged a brief, knowing glance across the crowded room, a silent acknowledgement of their shared secret, their impending triumph. They were so sure of themselves, so utterly convinced of their own brilliance. I stayed in the background, an old man watching the final act of a play he had written. I saw Daniel, steely and composed, laughing with guests. I saw my grandchildren, Leo and Sophia, dressed in their finest, blissfully unaware of the chasm about to open up in their lives. The sight of them was a physical pain, a reminder of the true cost of this night. Around 9 p.m., Daniel stepped up to a small podium by the pool. A hush fell over the crowd. "Friends, family," he began, his voice clear and strong, ringing out over the quiet music. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate 10 years with my beautiful wife, Genevieve." He turned to her, and she beamed, stepping up to his side. She squeezed his arm, a gesture of wifely affection that was pure theater. "These 10 years have been a journey," Daniel continued, his eyes locked on hers. "A journey of building a life, a family, and a future. And tonight, I have a very special announcement to make about that future." I saw Vincent smirk from the edge of the crowd. This was it, the announcement of the Dubai deal, the final confirmation that their patience had paid off. Genevieve's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Daniel paused, letting the silence hang in the air. He then turned his gaze from his wife to the crowd. "My announcement is this," he said, his voice dropping, losing its celebratory tone and taking on an edge of ice. "My wife Genevieve and her business partner, Mr. Vincent Dubois," he pointed a hand directly at a stunned Vincent, "have been orchestrating a detailed plan to defraud my company, frame me for financial crimes, and flee the country with over $3 million of stolen assets." And of course, to kidnap my children. The silence that followed Daniel's words was absolute. It was not a peaceful silence, but a violent, compressed one, as if all the air had been sucked out of the night. 150 guests stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Genevieve's smile didn't just falter, it shattered. Her face went slack with shock, her skin turning a pasty white beneath her expensive makeup. She let go of Daniel's arm as if it were red-hot iron. Her eyes darted from Daniel's cold, furious face to mine, standing in the shadows, and then to Vincent. Vincent Dubois' reaction was faster. His mask of smug charm dissolved into raw panic. He started to back away, to melt into the crowd. But two well-dressed men, the plainclothes officers, quietly moved to block his path. What? What is the meaning of this, Daniel? Genevieve stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. Are you drunk? This is a joke, right? A horrible, sick joke. A joke? Daniel's laugh was a bitter, ugly sound. Oh, it's sick, all right. But the only joke here, Jenna, is how you thought you could get away with it. He gestured to a large projection screen that had been set up earlier for a slideshow of their happy memories. It flickered to life, but instead of family photos, it was a copy of the wire transfer. $1.2 million from Peterson Designs to Vespertine Holdings. Does this look familiar, Jenna? You authorized this transfer last Thursday, draining my company's operating account. You thought I was too trusting and pathetic to notice. He had quoted her own words from the voice message. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as they began to understand this was not a prank. Genevieve's eyes were wide with terror. She looked at Vincent, a desperate, silent plea. But Vincent was trapped, his face ashen. Daniel wasn't finished. And you, Mr. Dubois, he said, his voice dripping with contempt as he turned his attention to the cornered financial advisor. You structured a phantom loan to bankrupt my company, a brilliant scheme. Unfortunately for you, the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office found it fascinating as well. They've been looking into your creative accounting for the past 2 weeks. The screen changed again, now displaying the damning photographs Frank had taken. Genevieve and Vincent embracing at the hotel. The two of them hunched over the documents from the Phoenix Trust. The crowd murmured, the sound growing from a whisper to a low roar of shock and indignation. These were their friends, their colleagues. They were witnessing a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. And as for the grand prize, Daniel continued, his voice resonating with cold fury, the money you wired to your little Phoenix account in the Caymans? I'm afraid there's been a slight change of plans. He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. By the authority of a U.S. federal court order, that account was frozen 10 days ago. The money is being held as evidence. You have nothing. You fled to a prison of your own making. This was the final blow, the realization that their escape, their new life, their entire meticulously crafted plan had not only failed but had been a trap all along, broke them completely. Genevieve let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure animalistic despair. She stumbled back, her silver dress looking like a shroud. And then there's this, Daniel said, his voice now quiet, but carrying more weight than all his shouting. He pulled out his phone, connected it to the sound system, and pressed play. My daughter's voice filled the night. Her own words, her own venom, her own betrayal, echoing across the silent, stunned faces of everyone she had ever known. The man is so trusting, it's almost pathetic. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in Monaco. God, I can't wait to be free of this suffocatingly decent life. When the message ended, Genevieve finally crumbled. She sank to her knees, her face in her hands, her body racked with dry, racking sobs. They were not sobs of remorse, but of failure, the sobs of a thwarted narcissist. At that moment, the captain of the security team and his officers, now clearly identifiable as law enforcement, stepped forward. Vincent Dubois, the captain said, his voice official and calm. Genevieve Peterson, you are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and embezzlement. The officers cuffed Vincent first. He didn't resist. He was a deflated balloon, all the air and arrogance gone out of him. Then they moved to my daughter. They helped her to her feet and put her hands behind her back. The sharp click of the handcuffs locking around her wrists was the final, definitive sound of her life as she knew it ending. As they were led away through the stunned crowd of guests who parted for them like the Red Sea, Genevieve's eyes found mine. They were wild with hatred, with disbelief, and with a dawning, horrifying understanding. In that one look, she knew. She knew it had been me, her father, the one who had unraveled her perfect crime. She had forgotten that the quiet old man in the corner had once been a lion. The party was over. The gilded trap had been sprung. Daniel stood alone by the pool, the architect on the ruins of his own creation. I went to him and put my hand on his shoulder. We said nothing. We just watched as the police cars, their lights now flashing in the darkness, pulled away down the long gravel driveway, taking my daughter with them. The hard karma she had sown had finally come home to reap its vicious, public, and unforgiving harvest. The aftermath was as messy and protracted as the takedown was swift and brutal. The case was a slam dunk for the prosecution. With the voice message, the paper trail, and Vincent's willingness to turn on Genevieve for a lighter sentence, they were both convicted. Vincent received 7 years in federal prison. Genevieve, due to her role in planning to abduct the children, received 10. 10 years, an entire decade of her life, forfeited to her own greed. Daniel, with my help, navigated the legal and financial maelstrom. We used the recovered funds to stabilize Peterson Designs. The public nature of the arrests, while humiliating, actually worked in his favor. Clients and colleagues rallied around him, seeing him as the victim of a shocking betrayal. His integrity was never in question. He emerged from the fire not just intact, but stronger, his reputation forged in the crucible of his personal hell. The hardest part, for him and for me, was the children. How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old that their mother is gone, not because she died, but because she did something terrible? We settled on a version of the truth, softened for their young ears. Mommy made some very bad choices and has to go away for a long time to think about them. It was a flimsy shield against a devastating reality, and I know the true cost will be paid out over the course of their lives. I sold my house and moved in with Daniel and the kids. He needed the help, and I needed the purpose. My quiet study was replaced by the chaotic joy of Lego creations and bedtime stories. The silence of my old life was filled with the sounds of a family slowly, painfully, reconstructing itself. I became a permanent fixture in their lives. Grandpa Walter, the one who was always there, the rock in their storm. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and the children are asleep, I sit by the same pool where my daughter's life came undone. I think about Genevieve. I don't visit her in prison. I have nothing to say to the stranger who wears her face. The daughter I loved, the little girl with the scraped knees, truly is gone. I mourned her death long ago, on a Tuesday afternoon in my study. The pain of her betrayal has not vanished. It has simply changed shape, settling deep into my bones, a chronic ache that reminds me of what I lost. But as I watch Leo and Sophia grow, as I see Daniel slowly find his footing and even begin to smile again, I know I did the right thing. Love isn't just about protection and affection. Sometimes love is about wielding the truth like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting out the cancer to save the patient, no matter how brutal the scar. I destroyed my daughter's life to save my family, and that is a paradox I will carry with me to my grave. That's my story. It's a story about how the people we trust the most can inflict the deepest wounds, and how the truth, once revealed, can be both a destructive and a cleansing fire. The events of that night still echo in our lives, a constant reminder that appearances can be a dangerous illusion. We rebuilt, not on the ashes of what we lost, but on the solid foundation of the truth and the unbreakable bond of family that remained. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about protecting the innocent and ensuring that a terrible betrayal did not get the final word. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the complexities of trust and the devastating consequences of greed, please let me know in the comments below. What would you have done in my position? Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell. If you found it compelling, please consider giving this video a like and sharing it with someone who might appreciate it. And if you'd like to hear more stories about life, truth, and the karma that finds us all, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. Stay vigilant and cherish the ones who are truly loyal.